What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back. And as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Bretto. The Green Bay Packers just wrapped up their annual family night practice, which is held inside Lambeau Field. There was over 65,000 in attendance, and we are here right now to break it down, go through my big observations, takeaways from everything that took place on the field. But first, before I dive in, as always, you can find me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work over at Packers Wire as well as Dairyland Express. And please hit like, hit subscribe on the video on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. So now let's dive into my takeaways, my observations from what happened on the football field. First, I'll start by saying there was a really competitive one-on-one portion. The part of the field that was closest to me was made up of the pass catchers, the receivers and tight ends, and the defensive backs, the safeties and the corners. I'm not going to go through here for each of those individual matchups, but you can find the article version of this over on Packers Wire, where I put the tweets in that article of each of those matchups, or go find them on Twitter, and I have them all posted there. First, I'm going to start with the injury updates. So, as usual, Eric Stokes, Rashawn Gary, they're on the PUP list. They did not practice. Grant DeBose on the NFI list did not practice. David Bakhtiari did not practice either. He dropped out of Tuesday's practice, did not participate on Thursday, and then was not available on Saturday. We asked Matt LaFleur about this afterwards, and he said that they're just being very flexible about the situation right now. It didn't sound serious by any means, but they're just being fluid with it, as they say, and just making sure that Bakhtiari is going to be ready when Sundays arrive. Elton Jenkins also did not participate. We learned afterwards that he was out with an illness. Josiah DeGuara left Tuesday's practice with a calf injury, and he was still out. And another new addition is Lou Nichols. He took a hard hit on Thursday and was not on the practice field on Saturday. Now for some notes, observations. Keyshawn Nixon, Samori Toure, and Jaden Reed were the primary punt returners. Jaden Reed and Keyshawn Nixon were the kick returners. I believe I've mentioned this on here before. Obviously, Keyshawn Nixon, all-pro return man. But I am curious to see, since he is taking on a much larger defensive role, going to be the starting nickel this season, if the Packers maybe pare back some of those special teams responsibilities. Maybe Nixon just does punt returns while Reed does kick returns, or vice versa. Reed does have ample experience from his time at Michigan State as both a kick returner and punt returner. As far as the offensive line configuration, without Bakhtiari and Jenkins, it was Josh Nijman at left tackle, Royce Newman at left guard, Josh Nijman at left tackle, Royce Newman at left guard, Josh Myers at center, John Runyon at right guard, Zach Tom at right tackle. During the last two practices, we've seen Zach Tom take some snaps at center. However, I think because of the absences of Bakhtiari and Jenkins, the Packers just lacked a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to move guys around. So this was the same five from the start of practice throughout. And one other note that I want to make in regards to the offensive line unit, and perhaps it sheds some light as well on why the Packers are looking potentially at Zach Tom at center. And during the 2-minute drill at the end of practice, there was a botch snap between Myers and Jordan Love. This is now the third time that there has been an issue with the exchange between them, just in a little over a week since training camp practices have started. So it's absolutely something we need to keep our eyes on. Matt LaFleur on earlier this week said that, Myers is playing well, but what they're looking for right now is consistency. And I think that really sums it up well in terms of what we saw from Myers last season. There were spurts of this really, really high level of play, but just the consistency, the roller coasters that he's riding, the Packers are looking for more stability, especially with a young first-time starting quarterback. Now, some special teams notes on the starting kick return unit featured two players that I want to highlight. The first is Patrick Taylor. Reason I want to talk about Taylor is because both Brian Gutekunst, both Matt LaFleur earlier this week talked about how more so than being a ball carrier, pass catching, blocking, special teams play in particular are going to be huge determining factors in who that third running back role is. So Taylor was out there again with the starting kick return unit. I'm really not sure how this is going to shake out. I know that's what they told us, but when you watch the on offense, Tyler Goodson, he's taken on a much larger role than Taylor or Lou Nichols. Talked about it on here. His alignment, they're putting him all over the place using that gadget motion role. And, as they say, the more you can do. And he's also taken more snaps with the, some snaps with the first team offense, more snaps with the second team offense than Taylor. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how that all plays out. And Goodson is still, at least from what I've observed, trying to carve out a specific special teams role. In the past, he's been, utilized as a return man, but again, they have Keyshawn Nixon, they have Jaden Reed. That's not going to be an opening on this year's roster. So he's going to have to carve out a role. Lou Nichols, has looked really good as a ball carrier, been shaky as a pass catcher, and he comes to the NFL with only 2 career special team snaps at Central Michigan. The other player, as I mentioned, is Innis Gaines. I'm not sure what his path to the 53-man roster looks like. He's listed as a safety. It's a very, very crowded room, but he spends most of his time in the slot, the nickel cornerback role. But again, cornerback, it's a deep room. It's a talented room. I'm not sure how exactly he fits within that position, but he's on the first team kick return unit. Last season, he made some impact plays on special teams, and he spent a fair amount of time, not all of his time, but a fair amount of time on defense this season with the second team in the slot. He could be the second slot option after Keyshawn Nixon. So you can see his path to contribute, but where he fits within those position groups, that's what I'm not so sure about. Also on the kick return unit, Tyler Davis, Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, Corey Ballantyne, Jonathan Owens, Tariq Carpenter, Eric Wilson, and Isaiah McDuffie. One player I want to highlight who is just so fun to watch is Dontavian Wix. His release at the line of scrimmage, his suddenness as a route runner allows him to create space with the pass or against the defensive backs, even though he doesn't have this elite 40 time. He doesn't have this elite speed, but he is very, very good as a route runner, knows how to create that separation, and is incredibly fun to watch. As the 5th wide receiver on this roster, and with the Packers' heavy usage of running backs and tight ends in the passing game, I don't see Wix carving out this large role this season. I think it's going to end up being more of a developmental year for him, for the reasons just mentioned, but he is absolutely someone who can impact all levels of the field because he has the ability to win in a variety of ways and run a wide variety of routes. After practice, Matt LaFleur said that Dontavian Wix is, texting Jason Vrabel, the wide receivers coach, at all hours of the nights because he is a player who always has his nose in the playbook, which that's what you always want to hear, especially about a young player. But I love watching Dontavian Wix, just a very, very good, very, very fun route runner to watch. I would say this was Tucker Kraft's best practice. He had some key blocks in the run game, and this was absolutely his best practice as a pass catcher. Made a play in the red zone, had another contested catch, consistently won his matchups in the one-on-one drills. We saw his yards after the catch ability, his yak ability on a dump off from Jordan Love, where he was able to get upfield in open space. Just a really, really good all-around performance from Tucker Kraft, who has seen his role within the tight end room increase over the last week. Specifically, what I mean by that is seeing more time with the starters. The tight end room as a whole played really well, I thought. Next bullet point I have here is talking about Luke Musgrave. We saw his big play ability on display. It was on display tonight. Unfortunately, Love was unable to connect with him on 2 of those instances, but one was a deep crosser where he was able to create separation. Another was a play down the seam, again, and he was overthrown on both of those. But then during the 2-minute drill, Love found him over the middle in open space, connected with Musgrave, turned it into yak opportunity after the catch, and he picked up about 30 yards on the play that moved the Packers during the 2-minute drill into the opponent's territory. So I just feel like that playmaking ability, but specifically where he was targeted, again, over the deep middle, down the seam. That's where we're going to see a lot of Luke Musgrave this season. That's where he's really going to make his biggest impact because, one, he's just a matchup problem. You put him in the slot, he's too big for a cornerback, too fast for a linebacker. You get him over the middle, and there's a ton of space there that he can take advantage of then when he has the ball in his hand. So I thought that this practice in particular just encapsulated very well, at least what I expect to see from him this season as a rookie. For the second practice in a row at the safety position, Jonathan Owens saw all of his snaps come with the starting unit lined up next to Darnell Savage. Matt LaFleur told us last week that they're going to continue to rotate the safety. So, perhaps next week we see Tarvarius Moore in there, for example. But right now it's been Jonathan Owens who's been running with the ones, and deservedly so. He's put together a very nice training camp, and he brings some much needed reliability to the position as a tackler. He was one of the best tackling safeties in football last year. I think he made 117 out of his 128 tackle attempts. So something to keep our eyes on. But right now he's been that starting safety alongside Darnell Savage. Perhaps the player of the day was Anders Carlson. He's had a very, very rough last 7 days kicking, very, very up and down. When Brian Gutekunst was asked about, where they're at with Carlson on Friday, Goody said there's no concern, specifying that he's a rookie kicker. A lot of rookie kickers go through ups and downs. The Packers understood that there's going to be days like this, that Carlson had over this past week, but they're preaching patience and they're taking that approach with him. Well, he had a really, really good bounce back performance. Carlson, after making just 11 of his 22 attempts the previous, I believe it was 4 practices, he was 8 of 9 in Lambeau Field in a much more game-like environment. Like I said, it was in front of 65,000 people. His one miss came from 50 yards, and it was really the hold the snap that got everything off to a bad start. The snap was high, the hold was shaky, the kick was missed. It really didn't look like it was his fault at all. His best kick came during a 2-minute drill at the end of practice where he made a 52-yarder with just a little bit of time left on the clock. So a very, very good performance, a great bounce back performance, one that he absolutely needed. And after practice, it made me think back to what Rich Bisaccia had said about Carlson following the draft. And, some of the reasons why the Packers wanted to draft him. One was his big game experience, and he showed that comfortability in front of the crowd on Saturday night. And 2 was his mental makeup. And again, we saw that as well with his ability to bounce back. Sticking with field goal attempts, Carlson's holders were Pat O'Donnell and Daniel Whelan. They were alternating attempts. And just as time goes on, I feel that this punter battle is actually becoming more of a battle. Daniel Whelan absolutely has a much bigger leg than Pat O'Donnell. He packs a lot of power. For Whelan to truly make a push at that starting punter role, it's going to come down to one, consistency, harnessing that power and being, again, consistent with it. But also, 2, his ability as a holder is really going to have to shine. I mean, a year ago, O'Donnell's holding ability was a big reason why he was brought in. Before Pat O'Donnell, as you recall, was Corey Bajorquez at punter, another punter with a big leg, but inconsistency as a holder. So when you have a rookie kicker, that just magnifies that aspect of it. And having a rookie holder and a rookie kicker when in a season where points are probably, at least early on, going to be at a premium with a young offense trying to figure things out. I mean, there's a lot of risk in that if the Packers do choose to go that route. So this is still unfolding. Obviously, there's, preseason games, a number of practices left, joint practices left, but it's absolutely got my attention as, Whelan just isn't on the roster to be on the roster. It feels like there's something developing here. And it's worth noting that if the Packers do move on from O'Donnell, they save $1.5 million in cap space. Throughout training camp, I've been really, really impressed with the play of the linebackers, specifically the starters, Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker. But I also feel that Isaiah McDuffie, Eric Wilson with the second team defense have played really well too, specifically against the run. This linebacker unit as a whole I felt has held up well against the run, filling gaps, flowing sideline to sideline. I thought they'd done a really good job. And tonight, Tariq Carpenter actually came away with 2 interceptions. One was off Sean Clifford with the second team defense. He just read his eyes really well, was all over it. The second was against the third team offense, and Benny Sapp, undrafted safety from University of Northern Iowa, deflected the pass, popped up in the air. Carpenter was able to come down with it. So Packers linebackers have looked really, really good. Speaking of Quay Walker, really, really fun play tonight. Offense was on their own 5-yard line, and Walker was lined up on the line of scrimmage as a pass rusher. Devondre Campbell was the only, true linebacker in the box. And then next to Walker on the line of scrimmage was Preston Smith and Lucas Van Ness at edge rusher, and then Kenny Clark in the middle. So just a really, really fun wrinkle to see. Quay Walker, I believe, had about 80-ish pass rush attempts as a rookie. Did really, really well generating pressures. I think he had 11 pressures in those pass rush attempts. And this is something to keep our eyes on. Pass rush coordinator or former outside linebackers coach Jason Rebrovich, he was asked earlier this offseason, where does Quay Walker fit into the pass rush scheme? And he just said, yes, he does. So how that role develops remains to be seen, or I should say the frequency at which remains to be seen. But step one, we know, and Kirk Olividati, the Packers linebackers coach, said, Walker has to continue to show that he can handle his traditional inside linebacker responsibilities before more gets put on his plate. But absolutely something to keep our eyes on. Like I said, a really, really fun wrinkle to see from the Joe Barry defense. Bouncing back to tight ends, Tyler Davis. He continues to hold up really, really well as a blocker. Even took some snaps at H-back without Josiah DeGuara. And he's going to carve out a role on this offense. Matt LaFleur even said after, they're going to have to rely on him more this year than they have previously. LaFleur also added that he's taken some steps or progressed as a pass catcher. But again, where we're going to see a lot of Tyler Davis is as a blocker, and I feel like he's been the best blocking tight end in training camp this summer. Let's get to Jordan Love. Matt LaFleur, mentioned there might have been some adrenaline, and it felt like you saw that early on. There were a couple of overthrows. Those 2 passes I mentioned previously to Luke Musgrave, one on a crosser, one down the seam were overthrows. Another came down the right sideline where Romeo Doubs ran a great route. He had a step or 2 on Jair Alexander, but again, Jordan Love overthrew him. However, after that, he really settled in. He was efficient from that point moving forward, took what the defense gave him. There were no interceptions. There weren't even any near interceptions. Love took care of the ball well. As I mentioned, took what the defense gave him, and his best plays came during the final 2-minute drill. He connected with Musgrave on a deep crossing route for 30 yards. On the next play, a quick slant and catch and run opportunity of Christian Watson for another 20. And then from just outside the 20-yard line, Love found Watson in the corner of the end zone. Corey Ballantyne was close in coverage, but Love dropped it right over Watson's right shoulder on the right sideline. And just a beautiful pass, beautiful catch, perfectly placed. Great job by Watson. So overall, Love's numbers, 11 for 19. Nothing to write home about, but you take away those early incompletions once he settled down, couple it with those throws he made during the 2-minute drill, and it was an all-around solid practice for him. Carl Brooks, interior defensive lineman, rookie for the Packers from Bowling Green. He capped off a really, really strong week. He's been playing well since Monday. A few pressures in each practice this week, continued that again on family night. His best play came during 2-minute drill against the second team offense, had what, if they were live tackling, what probably would have been a sack. So he continues to play at a really high level. I think that his role this season, he's still kind of in that 5th rotational role behind Colby Wooden, and then the Packers, big 3 on the interior defensive line, Slayton, Wyatt, and Clark. But he's someone who can move up and down the defensive front, and I think we'll see him in those obvious passing situations where it's, hey, go get the quarterback. Also want to shout out Colby Wooden. had some impressive snaps as well. Matt LaFleur said that duo held up well against the run, which is great to hear. TJ Slayton was generating a good push up the middle, and Devontae Wyatt's flashes continue to become more and more consistent. I've talked about it on here a few times. Success for this defense as a whole starts with stopping the run and just all around better play from the interior defensive line. And this group looks a lot faster. They're getting more push, and I've been pretty impressed with them, throughout the first week and a half of training camp so far. Now, obviously, they got to continue to show it. They have to, do it in the regular season when it matters, but a strong start for this group as a whole. The offensive line, again, it was tough sledding in between the tackles, but I thought the tackles, the tight ends, again, did a nice job at creating running lanes for the ball carriers more towards the outside. Lastly, I thought this was Malik Heath's best practice. Looked really, really good as a route runner, was able to create space, was reliable as a pass catcher. Him and Bo Melton, who had a really, really strong week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday of practices, they're competing for that 6 wide receiver role. And again, I don't know if that's going to be a roster spot this year. Each of them will have to continue to make plays and be consistent, but it's something to keep our eyes on. So there you have it, my friends. Those are my big takeaways, key observations from the Packers Saturday night family night practice. Hit like, hit subscribe on the video. Find all my work at Dairyland Express and Packers Wire. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. And until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack Go.